Tell me. So these startups that are building, how fast can they get something to market that we can see, and how fast will the results start happening? Do you think, or based on what you've seen?
I mean, a lot of what, especially for our co-created startups, a lot of the opportunities we've set up are basically quick wins. We have a platform that we're looking to integrate the cleaning system that already exists onto that could basically be a justifiable prototype for follow-on work. And then at the same time, the seaweed startup, we already have someone in our network who has the permit for growing seaweed in South Florida. So those are literally, let's build the team, let's get the plan in place, and we can implement. The only problem is, of course, permitting. Well, permitting on the seaweed side is already done, but at the same time, it's we're looking, for example, at the bay, and the fact that there's supposed to be $20 million to fix the bay, and nothing moves at the speed of startups, but that catalytic funding to fix the bay, we're literally helping to start pushing some urgency because literally there's solutions now sitting in front of them and balls in their court. As far as our existing startups go, they're at a lot of different stages. Some are already operational and looking to expand and scale. Some are just getting to their first prototype. Some have their prototype figured out and are just looking for the catalytic capital to start deploying them. So it's really a range of timelines on that. But I think the great piece is that no matter what, we're able to help each of them on their journey.
Awesome. So I want you to scare us for a second, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
What does the world look like? What does Miami look like? I don't know, a decade, 2 decades out, 3 decades out. If we don't do these things, if none of this stuff, if we don't get enough money behind it, or we don't get enough people behind it, what happens?
So I always love to preface this because there's this natural approach that people take to the environmental field where we get caught up in the problem and the sheer size of the problem. And one of the core parts of Seaworthy is, we're not like unrealistically optimistic. We're actually very grounded realists, and to a fault, honestly. But at the same time, it's also seeing it as an opportunity. So the way I want to characterize it before we move forward is just that basically, there are these stark problems, but we also already have solutions. And that's one of the key things that I'm not just saying that to reassure people, but more importantly, make people understand the opportunity and that this is a business opportunity and not a doomsday scenario.
I always love that about you. That's why talking to you is so great.
And it's not even an optimistic thing. It's really a realistic thing, and it's just calling bullshit on the people who cry about the toilet paper problem from the pandemic and relate that to the environment problem. And I'm just like, this was literally what happened at TEDx, by the way. But anyway, that's the point.
I'll have to talk about that later.
Yeah, it was frustrating. But bottom line, so let me paint it. So bottom line, obviously sea levels are rising and we're the lowest lying land around. So it's really, for Anya, actually, who's one of the founders of one of our companies. She said daily flooding by 2040, and at the same time, Miami Beach is actually the lowest lying land of all of South Florida. They're going to be first to go. I think the key thing is people think this stuff is decades out, right? But really, it just takes storm surge from one hurricane, right? That's the biggest thing. Storm surge is essentially, and I don't want to be misquoted. So bottom line, storm surge is kind of like the prototype of what could happen, right, over time, over decades. But climate change is only accelerating as our carbon emissions only get higher as we have more people coming into the planet. And more of the ice melt that's happening is also releasing methane. We're seeing methane seeps also from the deep ocean. So it's an accelerating phenomenon, and the science is very clear that we're going to get harsher storms. We're going to have higher sea levels, and actually one of the key things that I'm a big pusher on is saying we need to get desalination going, which is one of our areas. We call it seawater as a resource, one of our verticals, because long before we're underwater, seawater is going to intrude on our aquifer, and we're going to have a major freshwater drinking crisis. Um, so there's a lot of other things other than, oh, our homes are going to be underwater. Like before we get to that, major hurricanes are a bigger problem. Seawater intrusion into drinking water is a big problem. Obviously, I mean, it's still too early to speculate about Surfside, but there's a good chance that the fact that it was probably flooding and seawater was getting into the foundation of that building, there's a good chance that's what really corroded the rebar in the foundation. But that's speculation. Don't hold me to that. And then last but not least, it's really heat as well. And at the end of the day, the oceans are also the largest heat sink in the world. And so as our oceans continue to die off with, some fish species down 90 to 99%, our coral cover locally down 95%, I believe. We're already in an extinction event. It's not like we're going to have one. We're already in one. And so basically when people say, oh, sustainability, sustain what, right? Sustain the fact that
Right.
we're on pace to have right now by 2050 just as much plastic as fish in the ocean, but between the rate we pollute and the rate we extract, between the fact that our oceans are only getting warmer and more acidic, and coral literally are already living at their extreme point on average. Like we're already past the tipping point for sustainability, which is why we say take the regenerative approach. Because think about it, right? If sustainability is the goal, right? And we talk about I don't know if you heard of the Sustainable Development Goals, but the SDGs are like the
Mm-hmm.
thing the UN set, and I regularly challenge the SDGs because I don't think they're ambitious enough, frankly. Because if we go for sustainability and we undershoot, we're worse than where we are now, right? So if we go for regenerative and we undershoot, then worst case we sustain where we're at, which is literally what sustainability is going for. And where we're at now isn't worth sustaining, in my opinion.
So
So
so tell me
yeah.
okay. So you live this day in and day out, right? And you talk to a lot of people in this. Tell me there are enough people like you who are working and fighting the good fight here.
Well, yes and no. I think there are good people, but I think the bigger thing is there's not enough people thinking entrepreneurially, which is why I say for our space and what we're doing, it's much more of a social impact problem than an environmental impact problem. The science to fix this shit's already sound. Like
Mm-hmm.
we know, great, we have to cut down carbon emission and we need to find ways to sequester carbon dioxide. But most of the scientists in academia are just like, great, I'm going to publish more research on this. Who's actually implementing solutions, right? Everyone's afraid to prototype, and it's just these bubbles and silos and barriers that are all just perpetuating themselves with no one actually doing the meaningful work.